me about it. Come on, let's talk about it. Change up the things you see. Open your mind to possibilities. Find your power, passion, and your purpose. You know it's time for you to walk in greatness. Let's murder mediocrity. Slay your goals, live out your dreams. Right now. Inspirational Perspective.
I was thinking about self-love, but then I thought, people talk about self-love. Do we really understand what self-love is? And as I looking through my own notes and even doing more research on it, I started realizing that there's stages to self-love. And many of us will have a spa weekend, right? We go to the spa and we get a massage, and we'll take a picture of the massage bed, that you lay on and say, and the hashtag self-love, loving myself this weekend, right? Of course, everybody is like, yes, stuff like that. And we're like, self-love, manicure, pedicure, self-love. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's cool. Like nothing wrong, like no shade at all. Nothing wrong with that. Beautiful. But there's levels to this. And I think a lot of us, we point to that, and then many of us will leave the spa and go back to a toxic relationship. And it's like, if you really loved yourself, you wouldn't be going back to that house, though. Right? Okay, you got away for a moment. You were able to relieve some of the stress you're about to basically put right back on yourself. And so what are the levels of self-love? And how do we, especially as a community that has, I would say, struggled with this? Because when I look at my mom, my grandmom, stories I heard about my great-grandmother, my dad, my granddad, stories I heard about my great-grandfather, how it occurs to me is that in many ways, we are a group of people that really don't know how to love ourselves. And if you think about self-love as the first component, the very first component of all advancement, all individual advancement, right? Because if I don't love myself, my ability to truly meet my potential, my purpose, well, that falls to the wayside. One of the reasons why many people don't invest in self-development isn't because they don't have money, right? That's so expensive. She was cheaper. And then, they'll go buy a $300 pair of shoes, though, And it's like, okay, well. But that's self-love, Linal. Like, no, that's consumerism. Right? And by the way, that might not be you. For you might, you might be like, well, I really don't have money, but, you spend $300 in fast food every month. And that's definitely not self-love. Okay? Well, I got to eat. You don't know my life? Well, just keep listening. Just keep listening. How do we be with ourselves in a healthy, empowered way? Like, we're talking about self-love, right? And I want to talk about self-love, and this is like part one of a series, because when I really looked at this, you got to pick it apart. And the first part is psychological. It's just psychological and emotional. Safety. Like, I want to talk about that. Like, psychological and emotional safety as an act of self-love. Because many of us, we talk about self-love, but if you really put yourself first, you probably wouldn't go to work on Monday. Like, if you really, well, you don't know, I got bills to pay. Yeah, okay, but is that worth your psychological, emotional safety? When you really understand the impact of a lack of self-love, and one of the reasons why many of us might be checking out sooner than we should. Is your life worth it? But let's dive a little deeper. Like how, when we think about self-love, how to be with oneself in a healthy, empowered way, like being with myself, which, by the way, takes a certain level of self-awareness. And then how am I with others, right? Understanding that I am fully responsible for myself and how I interact with others and how they interact with me. I have to draw the boundaries for that in a way that is self-loving. How do we lead and how are we led? And is that aligned with our definition of self-love? And how to connect. First, connect with ourselves. A lot of us are disconnected. We're just in a cycle, like, completely disconnected from ourselves psychologically, completely disconnected from ourselves emotionally, spiritually, mentally, you name it. I know some folks are like, that ain't me. Keep listening. So then, this took my mind first to this notion of who we be at the core of our humanity, at the core of our very being, which is our consciousness, right? And this is why I had to start with psychological safety, because the only difference that, like when you take a chimpanzee and a human being, there's only a 2% DNA difference, right? It's not crazy. That's one of the reasons why Darwin's whole theory, blah, blah, blah. Look how close they are to us. We might be them. It's like, no, they are different. And by the way, 2%'s a lot, because believe it or not, the people who are incredibly wealthy and have complete volition in their lives only did 2% difference in terms of their actions and ways of being than you. Right? So 2%'s a lot. Right? It's a difference. It's a lot when it comes down to how we live, how we think, and what we do. It's a difference between somebody who's struggling in poverty and a difference between someone who is incredibly wealthy. So anyway, consciousness is what really brings, you think about human beings, it's consciousness. And our consciousness is determined by what psychologists call the mind, right? The mind, the brain. Now, if we're going to do this justice, I'm going to slow it down, right? Because we're talking about self-love. We really want to get into this. And so then the origin of this minor concept of consciousness was attributed to John Locke's essay concerning human understanding. He published this in the 17th century, 1690. Now, Locke defined consciousness as the perception of what passes in a man's own mind. All right, so this is consciousness. Again, we're talking about self-love. Just follow me. So then consciousness, or this idea of the mind, is a 17th century ideology and European at its core, which I know is a problem for some of us, right? So I said, okay, got to go deeper. And I know some of y'all, right, as soon as I said John Locke, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool, whatever. All right, so then in ancient Kemet, y'all back with me? It was believed that we thought through the heart. In fact, upon death, what would happen is the burial process. In the burial process in ancient Kemet, which also is Egypt, right? They renamed it, but Egypt, the Greeks called it Egypt. And so now in this, I guess European-dominated society, we call it Egypt now. And so these ancient so-called Egyptians in their burial process, they didn't value the brain, the mind. They were like, hey, everything happens in the heart. The heart is connected to everything, right? You take the heart, man dies. And so they believed that the heart, rather than the brain, was the source of all human wisdom. And so when it came to your emotions, your memory, the soul, your personality itself, they said that it was all tied to the heart. It all came from the heart. And because the heart had channels, they called this metu. And that linked the entire body together. And so in ancient Egypt, they would say that consciousness came from the heart. So then let's pull them both in, right? Nobody's wrong. All right, so the mind and the heart, if you're tracking with me. But then there's new science, right? 21st century, 2022, and they say, well, hey, wait a second. We're beginning to realize that the gut has just as many connecting synapses as the brain, if not more. And that maybe you're actually thinking your consciousness lives in the gut. All right, that's cool. Let's include that too. All right. So then, no matter what you say the origin is of consciousness, right? We're going to say it's all three, just so that way no one's left out. It is clear that we as humans should guard, right? Because if these are the origins of our consciousness, and we can't necessarily agree on which one, right? Ancient Kemet says the heart. They were incredibly smart. They built the Great Pyramid, so we can't just toss that, right? I was listening to a video about the Great Pyramid and how that it was built to conduct electricity. Like, word? Yo, they were way more advanced than we thought, right? Just thought it was pretty. It was a tomb. You know, we realize it's not just a tomb anymore, right? It was conducting electricity. What? Okay, so anyway, this ancient advanced culture says the heart, we got to keep it there. Then Europeans, you know, modern medicine, whatever, said the brain, the mind. And we got some science around that, right? Neurologists, they can tap in and say, I can see your brain waves, et cetera. So we got science around that, the brain. So we're going to include the brain. And then new science that says we have connecting synapses in the gut. All right. So then let's go back to self-love. Y'all probably see where I'm going. If you don't, stick with me. No matter the origin, what's clear is that we as humans should guard, if we're going to be, if talk about self-love, and consciousness is what makes us human, then at the very core, as a human, I have to guard my consciousness, which is my mind, my heart, and my gut. Now, what's interesting is about these three. All of these three, if they are wounded, they are critical wounds that can lead to death if you don't receive medical care, and lead to death quickly. Like most folks don't make it. Let's put it like that, right? You get stabbed in the gut, you're probably not going to make it. You get stabbed in the heart, that's about it. You get hit in the brain, you're done. All right. So when it comes to physical trauma, we get this, right? We get this. But today I want to talk about psychological and emotional trauma, since we're talking about self-love, and we talked about relationships last week. Everybody wants to be in a relationship, and those in relationships want to be out. Not all of us, right? Right? So if these are critical areas, that means that I probably should be guarding these areas even if it's not physical. That means from a mental perspective, I should guard these areas. From an emotional perspective, I should guard these areas. From a spiritual perspective, I should guard these areas if I'm going to adequately pour on myself love. Okay.
Dealing with your question of showing self-love, to me, is eliminating those things that hate you.
Yeah.
And that, for one, is filth.
Yeah, filth. Yeah.
First of all, as it relates to ignorance, not knowing and accepting the fact that you don't know is defeating the whole purpose and necessity of loving yourself. The University of Pennsylvania did a study regarding the psychological impact of living in filth and they chose Philadelphia as the site for that. The results was clearly that a clean environment contributes to your self-respect, self-esteem, self-love.
So then, Sel, what does a filthy environment contribute to?
Your decline, your death. Studies done by the Center for Disease Control, the American Medical Association, as well as the University of Pennsylvania, the Ford Foundation, Harvard, have basically said that living in filth not only determines the quality of life that you enjoy while you're here, but it can influence how long you live. And you said that earlier.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. I have a question for
you.
So, was it yesterday, Friday? I was getting my hair cut. And my barber was talking about the neighborhood that the barber shop is in. And he was saying that, he was like, yeah, man, my grandmother was telling me that when she moved into this neighborhood, that it was majority white. And it was a nice neighborhood. The schools over here were great schools. And as the neighborhood changed and became more brown, it began to digress and dilapidate. And he was asking me, Linal, what's wrong with us? Why would that happen? And why does this happen in our communities? And I know that you do a lot of community work, Sel. Like, I'm curious, what is your answer to that question before I let you go?
Dr. Frances Cress Welsing stated it succinctly and to the point. When she said that we as a people, us black folk, have a high tolerance for filth. And we do. And filth is at the root of many of our social ills. And I have used that as one of my pillars. We have got to understand.
Why do we have a high tolerance for filth? Do you know that?
We have habitually accepted it. We don't have the courage to challenge who we. Yes.
Excuse me. Can I offer you,
please,
my opinion?
Always.
I believe our tolerance is high for filth because many of us are broken. And when I'm broken on the inside, then I tend not to necessarily notice what's broken on the outside. And let me be clear about what I mean by broken, because I believe all humans are wonderfully and beautifully made. But you have the science of epigenetics that says that the traumas that we experienced in slavery, right? And this is one of the things that critical race theory and all the stuff, they're like, we don't need to talk about that anymore. It's like, no, we're still living and experience the consequence of this stuff, right?
Right.
But we were forced to live in squalor. We didn't come from that, but we were forced to live in that. We were forced to eat these foods, right? I was reading something, Sel, that said that Europeans understood that a high-starch diet would dull the mind. And so they gave us high-starch and fatty meat. You notice something about that? Because a lot of us still eat that. But it will dull the mind. So they attacked these three areas that I'm talking about. They attacked the mind, they attacked the heart, and they attacked the gut. It wasn't just physical trauma, but they hit us in every area that basically allows a human being to operate at their best. The mind, the heart, and the gut. So they fed us garbage. They broke our hearts. I mean, to the point where many of us still have attachment issues. Detachment, attachment. We can walk away from our children. That was learned, by the way, and it's passed down epigenetically. And then the mind. Because, again, many of us are still in chains mentally. And here's what I mean by that. Anytime I believe I'm not enough compared to someone who looks different from me, that's a mental chain. You're tethered to a concept.
Yes.
You're tethered to the doctrine of white supremacy. And it's difficult to adequately love oneself when the brain or the mind is chained, the heart is broken, and the gut is sick. That's why I believe our neighborhoods look this way.
I know you talk about self, but self does not begin with our family. And I'm troubled that we have not really dug into rebuilding the black family and reinstituting our community codes of conduct and our family value system, which extends to cleaning, self-respect, self-love, and all of these principles that you teach. Because self has no existing without a mother and a father coming together and producing a child, which makes a family. So we don't put these value systems and reinstitute these value systems, we're going to end up in the same place. It's almost starting backwards, trying to work forward. Mm-hmm. And we should start with the family structure, which is a father, a mother, and they have codes of conducts and principles. And when you were making an example about you was at the barbershop, and the brother was asking about why a white community here didn't black people come to the community. And I understand the slavery and all this other stuff, but we got to get past that. There is no excuses in 2022.
So we had that conversation too, Art.
Yes,
because he was he had a similar view. And while I agree, I also disagree. See, when we understand, here's why I disagree, Art. When we understand the ills that our ancestors went through for 400 years, and then when you look at how long we've been out of slavery, right? 1863 took 2 years, right? 1865, Juneteenth, hooray. Okay? And I'm being facetious on purpose, because it's like, it took 2 years. And so we celebrate that. We celebrate the act that we were freed. All right? But that's 1865. 1965, Dr. Martin Luther King is fighting for our civil rights. It's 100 years later, right? And really, at that point, 2 generations, and the second one is like on the verge, and so 2 generations. Here we are, a 3rd generation later. It hasn't been even close to 200 years yet that we've been out. And in the 100 years that we were out, when you look at what we went through, so we still went through psychological terrorism. We still went through, in many ways, we didn't even know to eat better, right? So we were still eating the garbage that we were taught to eat. And so think about the impact on our health, the impact on our heart, and the impact on our mind based on diet alone, right? And many of us still have severed and broken relationships. As a matter of fact, when you look at Baltimore, let me give you an example of what I mean here. Baltimore, what was that, Art?
No, I can respond when you finish.
Yes, please. Baltimore is the capital of incest in the United States of America. So somebody might say, well, why is that? And you would say, ooh, they just nasty, right? But we gotta look at this thing, though. Baltimore is also the site of one of the biggest breeding farms for slaves. The term MF, right, that we use so freely came from slave owners who would laugh at the fact that they made a son do that to his mother in these breeding farms. Okay? So these are the ills that were perpetrated on us. Man, this has psychological impact, heart impact, gut impact. And just because the Emancipation Proclamation is written doesn't mean that goes away. Go ahead, Art.
I would agree with you 100 million %. No one is saying that we should not teach our young children and people history and why.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't teach if you don't have a classroom. And your classroom starts with your family, number one. Number two, I hear what you say.
I agree with that.
Okay. I hear what you're saying, but we were more closer to slavery. When I watched slave movies, I saw the woman press her raggedy dress. The slave man pressed his raggedy whole suit. I saw the slave woman sweep dirt with a straw broom. Sweep dirt. They couldn't even read, write, and they was under deliberate and actual oppression right in their face.
So
but they still managed to wash that one cup.
Art, when you say a movie, you got to remember these are romances that are being written, brother.
Okay, let's get it out of. I can just use Emmett Till. I can use many instances where people were closer to slavery and they still maintain whatever dignity that they had.
I agree.
To do the best that they can.
We have
now
been
we
fighting.
have. Say it again.
We have been fighting. I agree.
Okay, so what I'm saying is I don't disagree with anyone that you should teach the history and understand why these psychological traumas have happened to us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't disagree with you on that. But you can't teach this class if you don't have a family.
Compassion and love. There's no excuse, but then at the same time, I think about the person who feels hooked on the food they're eating. Because, by the way, it's incredibly addictive. Sugar is one of the most addictive matters, addictive substances on the planet, right? Put it up there with cocaine. And you think about the amount of sugar that the United States food industry infrastructure puts in our food that the FDA says is okay. Like, I see, these are the things I'm looking at that give me compassion, right? Because there are people who don't have the knowledge I have. This is why this show is so important. This is why the streams is down on this show. Something's happening right now. I'm telling you. I was looking at my data with my team, marketing team. You know, before 2021, man, pop. You know, man, 2020 came when people really needed it. They were like, I can't control the algorithm. You guys can help me with the shares. But man, something is going on. There's they call it a disturbance in the force. And so my compassion comes from people who are looking at the food pyramid saying, I'm doing it right. People who have been educated that having bread and milk every day is a good thing. Again, high starch diet and dairy. Because we don't know ourselves, because we're so disconnected from ourselves. That's part of my purpose. And so for those of us who know, there is no excuse. It's time to unhook yourself. And if you can't get unhooked, that's part of what this conversation is about. Psychological and emotional safety. You have to begin, and that's why I created this subject. And this is why I'm pausing. I'm taking my time. I'm taking the phone calls. It's going to be a little different. I want to make sure people really get this. Because I agree that it's the family, but the family is under attack. The family has been under attack. And when they realize that as a unit, as a community, that the family kept pulling us back out, right? Man, we attacked them out of 1865, sharecropping, etc. The family unit pulled them back out, right? We went out, we created places like Tulsa. Then they blew those up, right? And the Tulsa wasn't the only one. There were maybe 66 different communities like that. They burned them to the ground, right? And we got to remember this stuff. And so then here we are, frayed and fractured, because that's what that does to you. And that is psychological. Like, think about the psychological impact of that on the black doctor with the family, or the little girl, little boy that's left because their father is gone. He was murdered. Like, that's psychological. You took one in the gut and your heart is broken. And when you're broken, well, look at our communities. This is what you get. See, today we're talking about self-love. Like, we got to start at the beginning. So then, and we were talking about black history too. I told you, I knew this was going to bring up the history. All right, so then, fast forward from that, and we have a civil rights movement. We have these spectacular, wonderful leaders that become birth. Thank God for them. Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Edgar Mevers. Where are they? They killed them. Our heart is broken again. Our mind. Think about the psychological impact on anyone else that wants to lead that way. Psychological safety. This is why I'm having this conversation. Then what do? They send a lot of our boys, our men, to war, Vietnam. They come back broken. And as a family unit, every time, like it's a roller coaster, every time we start to move up, family unit starts to come back together in the 70s. Hey, when you look at marriage numbers in the 70s, like almost 90% of black men were married. What'd they do? The war on drugs locked them up. So I'm telling you all, like, it's a both and. We can say there are no excuses. You need to, but wait a second. You gotta understand our history. And then when you look at it, just because the implications aren't necessary, man, I look at my family. I look at my family and who I am and the trauma and dysfunction of my family unit, starting with my mother and father, who, by the way, did a damn good job. And it was still dysfunctional. Why was it dysfunctional? Because they came from dysfunction. So our brain is designed to be concerned with threat in the world, right? And the part of the brain that does this is the amygdala. It's the lower brain. For those of you watching the stream, it's like back here, right above the spinal cord. And this part of the brain causes the following emotions and more: anxiety, despair, fear comes from this place. Keep that in mind. Fear comes from back here, not from up here where your foremost intelligence is, right? So when you stop because of fear, you stop because of some perceived threat that's likely untrue, and you never gave your prefrontal cortex the opportunity to process that. All right? And by the way, trauma and children that grow up in trauma have little learned access to the prefrontal cortex, which is why they conduct themselves in the ways that they conduct themselves. So when you see our brothers and sisters who seem to react the way they react and be the way that they be, have compassion for them, because it's important for you to understand that they have little access to the prefrontal cortex of the mind, because they've been trained to have little access to the prefrontal cortex of the mind, because they spent their childhood years in anxiety, despair, hopelessness, anger, rage, and fear. Okay? And that's what the amygdala produces. And here's what we should know about the amygdala. One is that it's emotional. It's focused on threat and fear response. It's instinctive and impulsive. All right, keep that in mind. And it's non-conscious. It does what it does without the conscious mind. And as humans, we're talking about consciousness. So, like, let's really break this down. Let's break this part down right here. So, we experienced slavery, and what our captors did is they purposely pushed us towards the amygdala, and then they said, oh, look at them, look how they act. They're not human. Because we were acting without consciousness. Like whenever, and not everybody, right? Because you had some folks like Nat Turner who were like, wait a second. Right? You had some folks like Frederick Douglass that are like, this don't work. But again, remember, Frederick Douglass, slave master's wife, taught him how to read and use his prefrontal cortex early on in life. So he was set up to run. He couldn't, there's no way he could stay on a plantation as a slave after having access to that intelligence. See, I'm trying to go somewhere here, okay? So, I want you to think about our ancestors who were slaves. When they are placed in a situation where they only have the amygdala, think about the overseer on the horse with the whip. Constant fear, even when you're doing your job. Am I doing it fast enough? Like they kept them in the amygdala on purpose, emotional, focused on threat, fear response, right? Instinctive, impulsive, non-conscious. You don't think that has an impact today? You don't think that has an impact today? So then let's talk about the higher brain, the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is designed to provide rational, logical strategy. And this part of the brain is not fully developed, listen to this, until we're about 20 years old. So then again, if I'm a child and I'm not getting some blood to the prefrontal cortex as a child, right? And this is what my wife and I do with my son. Sit down and write your ABCs. I don't want to. Of course he doesn't want to. He wants to live in the amygdala. He's a child, right? This is why children do childish things. Keep that in mind, right? This is why some adults still function like children, because they don't have full access. And they could train their mind to have full access. I think Malcolm Little is a great example of that, right? Malcolm Little became Malcolm X. All he needed was a little time to slow down and train the prefrontal cortex. That's a rhyme, by the way. Okay, so here we are. And that right there, that in itself shows you the potential that we have when we slow down with these things, okay? Self-love. And notice he stepped into self-love. He stopped putting the chemicals in his hair, right? Because that's impacting your mind. That's impacting your mind. Let me say it again. That's impacting your mind. Although I don't know many sisters that are doing that anymore. That most of us are natural now and enjoying our natural beauty. Thank God for that. But for the ones that still are, just wonder, you got to wonder. By the way, that's part of what causes fibroids and all types of other things. Talk about gut safety. So the mental difference between a child and a healthy, mature adult, then we can say it's the prefrontal cortex, right? The ability to fully access the prefrontal cortex. And notice that it's not fully matured until we're about 20 plus years old. Interesting how they say we're adults at 18. Your child can make decisions for themselves. Now, here's the biggest one, and I'm going to say it. If the prefrontal cortex is not fully formed as a child, then how do they really know their sexual orientation? I said it. This is psychological, man, this is science. This is science, and I'm not homophobic, none of that. I love all of y'all. I'm just saying there's an attack on the family. Okay, so then when you look at, because we're just having a straight up science conversation right now, like, and you can call me and debate me on that. Like, I welcome anybody to call me and debate me on it. Okay? Matter of fact, Justin, if they call on that, put them through. All right? Now, between these two areas of the brain is a braking system. So between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, there's a braking system. And this allows us to block the impulses of the amygdala, right? We have to be trained. So right now, my wife and I have it set up Monday, Tuesday, Thursday mornings. My son and I, we go through karate training. He's like, I don't want to. Like this Thursday, he was like, I don't want to, man. Stand in the block. We got a towel in the kitchen floor. Stand in the block of the towel and go into stance 1. Then he has to go through his punches and things like that, kicks, whatever. What am I doing? I'm teaching him to move past his amygdala at 4 years old. Doesn't matter what you want to do. This is what you must. He has to pull from somewhere else in order to pull it together. He has to pull mentally from somewhere else outside his emotions to pull it together. He's going through that training now. Now, if the brake doesn't work, right? If this braking system that says no to the amygdala, nah, it ain't time to snap out, Linal. Like, ooh, that made me mad. Like, I don't want to say, no, think about it. Let's think about it. Let's process it, right? If this system doesn't work, then I will always be emotional. Oh. Be like, man, why they always in their feelings? Now you know. Now you know why they always in their feelings. This is otherwise known as going from 0 to 100 real fast. Now, what folk do we know that can do that? We can go from 0 to 100, and we're proud of it too. Oh, I was in the store yesterday, and this so-and-so lady, right? Y'all fill in the blank. Thought she was just gonna get in front of me, girl. Like, oh, I let her have it. Why? Because we know how to let the amygdala do its work. And then here's the thing. Some of us, we'll let the amygdala do its work and then bring in the prefrontal cortex because we're gifted like that. In the words we use and the language we use, oh, they ain't never got cussed out like that before. Because we took our intellect and our brilliance and we mixed it with our amygdala emotional response and gave them something that they won't forget. And then we get proud of it. So I told her. All right. So when the brain starts to shut down, the prefrontal cortex, even the adult has no control. And this is why we go overboard sometimes. Then security came. They had to walk me out. Like, what? Like, you... What? Because then you just lost control. You just lost control, right? You don't even know why you did it at that point. You don't even know why you don't even know why. You just like, yeah, I went nuts. Well, because the prefrontal cortex got arrested, the amygdala took over. Many of our ancestors had to work sun up to sundown. Let's think about that. Sun up to sundown, sun up to sundown. Well, what does that equate to? Sun comes up 6 a.m., right? Let's just say on average, 5:50. Say, I know that, 6:15, depending on the time of the year. Let's just say 6 a.m. and goes down about 7. Sometimes 8 in the summers. Think about the summer. The days are the longest. That means our ancestors were working 14 hours in the fields. Now, the prefrontal cortex of the brain needs rest. It needs rest and rejuvenation to work. So their amygdala is charged all day with stress and fear. And then, now you still got to feed yourself and feed your children and all those things. And you finally get some rest and you're right back up before sun up. This was done like they understood what was happening. And some of us, we still work sun up to sundown, not even realizing that it's an epigenetic trauma response. And then we get proud of it. I'll be putting my hours in. And it's like, no, that's not cool. Self-love. Self-love. Take care of yourself. The reason you can't figure out a way to get out the wheel is because you're too tired to figure out a way to get out the wheel. It's all amygdala working. No prefrontal cortex brilliance and intelligence. You got it, but can you tap into it? You need rest and rejuvenation to do that. So the brain treats the internal stressors the same way we manage external stress. Chronic stress could be one of the causes for dementia due to the stress of the brain. You think about how many of our people get dementia. Okay? But it doesn't just come from stress. It also comes from not treating your gut properly. Aspartame, that is in diet sodas, cause dementia. So again, this is a matter of the mind, the heart, and the gut when we talk about self-love. We can't leave any of them out. If you want to begin decreasing the amount of negativity in your life, you have to we have to decrease your stress. You have to increase your rest. You have to increase your ability to get to the prefrontal cortex of your mind. How do you do that? Goals. Intention. One of the things for my Slay Your Goals community, I say, hey, read your goals every day. That's a prefrontal cortex exercise. Affirm your goals every day. That's a prefrontal cortex exercise. You're engaging the most brilliant part of you. Watch how the negativity decreases from there. So, stress is not all bad because we do need stress because it creates optimal arousal. So there's good stress and bad stress. I said that. Again, this is another reason for goals because I would rather create goals that create intentional tension. This intentional tension is a stressor, but it's a healthy stressor because I'm going for something here. Okay? Versus be unintentional with no goals and have the external stress of the problems that no goals create, like lack of health, lack of relationship, lack of work, lack of money, lack of purpose, lack of spirituality. So the brain treats social and physical pain in the same way. And it often can enhance social pain. So why do we only focus on protecting ourselves physically? See, we got to get to a point. I was having a conversation with my brother about a particular relationship. And I said, I have no intentions of building that relationship. And he was like, wow, why not? And I was like, because I am not setting myself up to deal with someone's unresolved trauma, unresolved emotional issues, guilting, shaming, insulting. I'm just not. Why? Psychological safety. Like, I love myself too. I don't care who you are. I'm not building a relationship with you if you bring those things into my life. Psychological safety. I understand that social pain can cause sometimes a deeper impact than physical pain. Some of us right now, there's somebody you need to let go. You're addicted to their negativity. You're addicted to their insults. You say addicted, Linal? Yes, addicted. Addicted to it. You know you're taking abuse. It's time to let it go. You want to love yourself? Do that. Post that. I let go of a toxic relationship today. Hashtag self-love. Okay. That's some real self-love. A cruel comment from a coworker could potentially be more painful than an uppercut. Long term. See, the difference with an uppercut is, I bit my tongue in my mouth. Ooh, it hurts. And then it heals up. You just might watch somebody if they lean in too quick. Oh, wait, no. But a cruel comment, it just lives inside you. Bounces around your brain. Maybe I'm not enough. maybe they right. I'm not that smart. Then you start to make choices based on that. And those choices go on for years and years and years, and it grows like a cancer. Sometimes we just got to stop folks before we even get it out. Nope. I ain't even listening to it if it's negative. This is why psychological safety is so important. And you talk about self-love. You want to love yourself? Anytime somebody about to come up and say something negative for you, I don't care if it's your spouse. I'll be quiet. I'm not letting you pour that into my life. Self-love, hashtag self-love. I'm serious, man. The number one factor of high-performing people in teams is their ability to create and maintain psychological safety. I can guarantee you right now that most people who are incredibly successful in the world also have psychological safety barriers in place. They're not letting toxic people tell them things. Muhammad Ali left his second wife or first wife? He left her because she said, I can't, she didn't believe he was going to win. You don't believe I'm going to win? Pack your stuff, go home. What? Boy, there'd be a lot of divorces. That's a whole nother level of psychological safety. You don't believe I can win? Go home. I'm done with you. Now, some people might say, well, she was concerned about him. That's crazy. That's a whole nother level. They say, why did he keep his partner with him who had a drug addiction? Because of how he poured into him psychologically. Muhammad was like, you can take the belt and sell it, but when it's time for me to go back in the ring, I need you because of what you do for me psychologically. He understood that that's a whole different level of self-love. I could use one of them. Somebody, before I get on the show, that's like, you are the greatest. Boy, when you speak, the world listens. I'm like, what? That's what we need, man. So, I want to share this safety model. I'm going to get to the phone calls. This is Safety Model by Dr. Dan Radecki. And these are the areas where you should constantly be evaluating your own safety, right? Psychological safety, heart safety, gut safety. First, your personal security. If you're in a place where someone can cause you physical harm, you need to leave that place. And I get that sounds easy. It sounds easier than done. I get that. I understand. Well, I don't completely understand. I have compassion and empathy because I've never been in that situation. So I can't say I fully understand. But, man, do what you need to do to get safe. The next is autonomy. If you're in a situation where you don't have autonomy. Hey, there's some relationships, grown folks don't have autonomy in their relationships. They can't even go nowhere. Where you going? I just wanted to run to the store, babe. We don't need nothing from the store. I just want to. No, you can't. Why tonight? Do it tomorrow. You don't have no autonomy. And then you like, okay. Like that does something to you. If it's different if you like, yeah, you're right, I'll do it tomorrow. That's different. That's different. But if you like, you just can't go. I just wanted, a couple of things for tomorrow. I want to get it. No, stay here. You don't have no autonomy? You're an adult? It'd be different if they're like, hey, it's dark. I'm concerned about your safety, hon. I just really appreciate if you didn't leave right now. Like, you just can't go? Women submit. No autonomy. Esteem. By the way, security, autonomy, SA in a safety model, right? SA. Fairness is the F. Fairness is subjective in many ways, but you all get what I mean by fairness because some of us are in unfair environments. Esteem, something that's attacking your esteem. In many ways, the current the current education system we have in place attacks our young people's esteem. This is my biggest conundrum with school right now. My biggest conundrum with school right now is this whole esteem thing. See, because Robin Walker has this term he calls social esteem. If you don't know who Robin Walker is, he's a phenomenal historian. And he has this thing called social esteem. And social esteem is when I know so much, again, black history, I know so much black history that I can't help but be proud of my people, of my kind, because we bad like that. Wouldn't be no cell phone if it wasn't for us. Wouldn't be no internet if it wasn't for us. Wouldn't be no stoplights if it wasn't for us. Wouldn't be no mailbox if it wasn't for us. I could keep going. That's social esteem right there. You know what I'm saying? That's social esteem. So then I say, then the people who did that, they look like me. So what can I do? But see, our young people don't know the internet was built by someone like looks like them. They don't know when they put their mail in the mailbox, and they only get 28 days to learn it. Again, go back to arts thing. That's why the family's so important, because I promise you, Legend's going to be learning this every day, all the time, right? As soon as he's at that point where you start understanding, skin color, like, well, let me show you some folks that look like you that did some phenomenal things. All right, so safe. We're at safe. Security, autonomy, fairness, esteem. T is trust. Are you in an environment that you can trust? People. Man, do you get that if you are constantly around people you can't trust, that puts you in a fight or flight mode all the time? You can't process things. It's self-love just to get away. And then, get this. At the end of the safety model, the why is you. You constantly take care of you. Security, autonomy, fairness, esteem, trust, and self-love. You. Now, when we talk about security, a couple of things. Security is consistency. See, this is why children need consistency. It provides security. As much as my son's like, I don't want to do it right now, that consistency is security. That's security. I don't want to write my letters. That consistency is security. Security is consistency. Hold on, Slay Your Goals members. Commitment. So wait a second. Commitment equates to security? Why? Because when I'm committed to something, I have predictable choices. I'm committed to not eating that. Predictable choices, security. See, I'm not exposed to certain poisons because I'm committed to eating a certain way. Security. That's how Karen says it. Security. Here's the other thing, certainty. See, we live in an uncertain environment. You can't tell me right now, 2022, 2020, 2021, 2022 have all been uncertain. So that means that wherever I can, I need to be able to derive certainty in my life. Certainty. There are people I know, I'm certain, that love me. Those are the people I spend my time with. There are certain people I'm certain will protect me. Those are the people I spend my time with. There are certain people I'm certain will pour into me. Those are the people I spend time with. Security. Autonomy means as human beings, we feel like we must have some level of control over our lives. Do you have that? Here's another example of how powerful autonomy is. There's proven studies that when a patient can control the amount of pain medication they use, they tend to use a lot less. Isn't that something? If I'm in pain, and I can control the amount of pain medication, because I know my own threshold, right? Autonomy. And I'm like, oh, it's getting bad. Let me just hit the button. Okay. But in the end, I use a lot less. Now, think about how little autonomy we have right now. I'm just saying. Some of y'all can't even go and eat right now. Some of us can't even go and eat right now. You know what I'm saying? And that's okay because I'm eating good at home. That's where my autonomy is. I'm just saying, you notice how they go after autonomy? In the effort for security. Folks, I wish I could just download certain things. But then that wouldn't be autonomous, right? That wouldn't be okay. We got to get it the way we get it.
Code of conduct taught us, Negro Black, that we were a movable property thing called chattel.
Yeah.
And from 1866 to 1954, 88 years of Jim Crow genocide, segregation laws.
That's right.
To keep the status of the Negro, not everybody, but the status of the Negro down, did not happen to everybody. And everybody wasn't found to have had heart and mind self-hate, subjugated syndrome damage.
Mm-hmm.
And other races, now point number 2, other races do not have the subjugated syndrome.
No.
So they don't say things like, sit your slanty-eyed self down. Sit your white, thin-lipped self down. Sit your brown-skinned, straight-hair self down.
You don't hear that from them. They don't say it to each other. They don't say that to each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we got a code of conduct coming from the slave master mama. And what do we say? Things like, sit your black, nappy head,
all
thick
that.
lip.
All that.
All that. Self-hate taught to us.
That's right.
And everybody else didn't have that slave master mama teaching
It's
them
insidious.
that.
It's insidious.
Exactly. And it is so good that you're bringing this out. And the final thing, number 3, when it comes to diet, I read a book that said the slave that worked from sun up to midnight down from the cradle to the grave, diet was a pinch of salt and a shook of corn. So when the mass slave owners threw away the guts, the slaves wrestled with those dogs and cats.
To get those guts. To get those guts.
And fried it up to supplement their diet. So soul food.
Because they needed some protein.
Exactly. They needed more than a pinch of salt and a shook of corn.
Yep.
And so we got soul food, meat of the swine instead of the meat of the word due to our enslavement. So finally, I just wanted to
let me real quick before you go into the final part, Mama D. I just gotta ask the audience this: why would we eat a meat that, when it's raw, if you throw salt on it, parasites come out of it? Hold on. Why would we eat a meat that, if you pour Coke on it, parasites come out? I mean, instantaneously. I'm not even saying you got to sit and wait for a while. Like, this meat is fresh. It said sell by, how it says sell by. It said you buy it today, this swine, this pork. You buy it today, and you take it home, and it says sell by Friday. So it's fresh, right? You got it Sunday. If you take it out and you pour salt on it and you leave it there, parasites gonna come running up out of it. If you pour Coke on it, parasites gonna come running up out of it. But then we'll fry that up and say this is some good eating. Why? Because the tongue said so. And our psychological sickness passed down, like what Mama D's talking about, passed down from generation to generation, says so. And this is something that when we were in the motherland, we wouldn't have touched. I want us to reappraise the stress in our lives. I want us to reappraise this morning the negative emotions in our lives. Not that bad things don't happen, but we weren't designed to be constantly hit with bad things. What we learned today is that whenever we slow down and we reappraise, right? Resilience can be created by simply labeling the emotions we feel. Here's some practices. Let me give you some practices before we end. Resilience, you can, if you want to begin developing your resilience, all you have to start doing, no matter, you might be like, Linal, I don't know how to get to the prefrontal cortex of my mind. I don't know how. Okay, that's fine. All I want you to do is when the amygdala is doing its thing, you're experiencing the emotions you're having. All I want you to do is start naming the emotions. Simply label the emotions. This is going to start creating resilience in your life. And that labeling, that reappraisal is going to allow you to learn how to reduce stress in your life. Learn how to reduce the negative emotions that are coming. Because when I can name it, I can control it. Right? When I name it, I have dominion over it. You learn this in Genesis. So now I'm naming the emotions. Ooh, that's anger. Ooh, that's rage. Ooh, that's depression. Ooh, that's, name them. Name them. Because then all of a sudden, this is psychologically proven, you all. I'm not making stuff up here. All of a sudden what happens is your stress begins to reduce because now I know it when it's coming. See, you're already built to guard yourself. So when you say, ooh, that's negativity coming, the amygdala says, we got to run. We don't like that. That will become the impulse. But if you don't name it, it doesn't know. The amygdala doesn't have consciousness. So now you name it, develop your consciousness. And then what this does is it activates the prefrontal cortex and begins to dampen the amygdala. All your impulses come from back here. When you eat, where are you eating from? Are you eating from your intelligence and your brilliance, or are you eating from your impulsive responses? Where are you eating from? Are you making your ancestors happy? They were forced to eat it. If they saw you eating it now and they saw the choices you had, would they cry or would they smile? See, we got to ask ourselves these questions. See, so when you activate the prefrontal cortex, it begins to dampen the amygdala. And when you do this, your brain gets better at it. Right? It starts, that practice strengthens your ability to use your prefrontal cortex. And this is the first step of self-love for some of us. This is the first step. Whatever circumstance you're in, man, I may not understand it, but I know that if you do this, it will start to pull you out of that circumstance. You may not be able to go to the spa, but you can name your negative emotions. You can name the emotions that aren't helping you. You can begin to develop that level of resilience and begin to tap into the brilliance and the intelligence that the Creator gave you. Here's some self-love practices. Write these things down. Identify the things and factors that cause unhealthy stress for you. Begin practicing 1, personal emotional awareness. Here's another big one. 2, turn off the TV and go to sleep. Your prefrontal cortex needs the rest. Hey, man, this society understands what it's doing to you. Why do you think all of a sudden all the good stuff comes on at 10 p.m.? They want you responding. They want you impulsive. Go to sleep. Be better. Go to bed. Number 3, personal security. Just assess your personal security. Do the things you need to do to feel secure. Number 4, practice resilience by naming your emotions. This strengthens your prefrontal cortex. Then I have a couple of questions I want you to answer. Here's the first question. What are the top 3 things that threaten you in the workplace? See, this is where a lot of us are getting caught up. Name it. This is what we're doing. We're naming it. What are the top 3 things that threaten you in the workplace? And then, in contrast, because this is where we're going to do a level set. What are the top 3 rewards from your workplace? So you can really see, I'm going through this for that. Now, if it makes sense, that's different. If it don't make sense, it's time to go.